Watch us on NBA TV.
During the last commercial break of the 2003 NBA draft, they came back from the commercial and I saw my name scroll across the bottom of the screen. Everybody went crazy. The 51st pick to the New Jersey Nets. I found out shortly afterwards that I'd been traded to Philly. I'm not sure if trade is the right word. I was more or less sold for an undisclosed amount of money. I later found out they used that money to pay for the entry fee for their summer league team, and with leftover money, they bought a copy machine. What's your trade value? Apparently mine is a copy machine. But it's okay. Because a couple years ago, that copy machine broke. And I'm still playing.
Well, maybe that trade involving Kyle Korver wasn't quite as weird as you might think. After all, Ed Monix was traded to the Flint Tropics for a washing machine in semi-pro. But I digress. Now, with the NBA draft coming up on Thursday, let's talk about how trades come about on draft night. Tom, you first.
Ooh, all different ways. We talked earlier about preparation. And Billy, you know, you put the big list. You have your lists. Your lists of, everybody knows their draft order list, but you'll have your trade potential list.
Yeah.
Because as the deadline approaches, the real deals start coming. And the key is waiting for the deal you want. But it's a fluid and dynamic market. I mean, if you're sitting in the middle of the first round, sometimes the picks are flying so fast you can't keep track of who has what pick.
Right.
And you need to be very organized and very diligent about having a process in place where you keep the information straight and you keep your priorities straight. Because as I say, on draft day, it starts happening faster and faster, and it turns chaotic quickly sometimes. And you need to stay true to what you really want.
And I remember back in the 2015 draft, we had communicated to the NBA, listen, we got our board, and if our guy's not on the board like you normally do, we'll trade the pick. And this is the parameters of what we're looking for to trade the pick. Well, sure enough, our top 14 are gone at the 14th pick, and we got 15. And as 13 is making their selection, the phones just flood in. At one point, we had 11 offers on the table. No joke.
Yeah.
But that was before pick 14 was selected. Cameron Payne went 14. Those 11 offers, they went to 2. We had 2 left, right? And we picked one. We flipped back and we went from 15 to 19 to, it was a trade that we did and ended up with, you know, I think it was 2 second-round picks to flip back a couple spots. But then, to your point, we want to retrade 19 again, so how do we do it? So I leave the room, I make a phone call to an undisclosed human being who all of a sudden a tweet pops up, right? And, you know, you got to know how to use the media to communicate that you might retrade 19, and then all of a sudden all those phones start ringing again, and we ended up retrading 19 to New York for Tim Hardaway Jr., but we had to find a way to communicate that to the NBA, and that's where, you know, relationships in the media, it's a part of the process.
Yeah, we always did, you know, the mock drafts that you run through. We always believed in preparation. So there was always the impossible call that comes through from, you know, such and such, like the Lakers want to trade you Shaq. You know, like, I mean, and,
what are you going to give up for?
Yeah, and we actually would run through all of those scenarios. So, you know, we always tried to go into the draft room with the expectation that anything could possibly happen. And if anything happened, would we be ready for it, and how would we react to it? So most of all draft nights, they ran, you know, pretty smoothly. We get a call. We made some trades on draft nights, but, you know, credit to our staff and everyone else that was working. We were pretty much prepared that, you know, when things came in, we were able to handle it and were able to, you know, make some pretty good deals.
Well, and one thing, we brought our scouts in about a week before, and they would be locked in a room and they would hammer it out. And once we got 1 through 60 done the night before the draft, it didn't change.
Then it was pizza night.
There was pizza.
Everybody wanted a pizza. You locked down. We're spending the night here.
Yeah. And so then, like with the Kyle Korver trade had happened, like you start calling. I called Rod earlier in the draft. Said, what about 52nd? Would you sell it? And Rod goes, I don't know, maybe. You know. And so he says, I'll put you down as a maybe. And so you try to figure out who may be moving picks. And we fortunately had some money, so we always bought a few picks here and there and moved some around. And so as it happened that we had already traded up and got Willie Green in that draft, and we were pretty confident, but I really liked Kyle. And all of a sudden Rod calls later and says, "You still want that 52nd pick?" And Kyle's on the board. And I said, "Yeah, how about 125? He goes, "Sold." And that's how we got Kyle Korver. But a lot of it is preparation, and by having the list of the board done, so when things happen, somebody call, if you have a guy still on the board you like, then you're able to do it. If you don't know who you're going to take, then it becomes chaotic. But it does get, sometimes you got to remember which picks you've traded or which pick who has what. And sometimes a pick has been traded 2 or 3 times before it's been.
That Kevin Durant ruptured his Achilles, and we're back on Draft HQ. Rick Kamla, Isiah Thomas, Tom Penn, Billy King, and Wes Wilcox. And Wes, talk about the dynamics of that player and executive relationship.
Yeah, it's critical. You know, we talked about the difficult times when you're making the human decision. Well, you have a lot of time to build that equity and build that capital with not only dealing with the player with honesty, with integrity, taking care of their family, but it's also different how you build the relationship versus if you sign the player as a free agent where they're older and more established in their career, or like this time of year during the draft, where you get to interview them and build a relationship maybe with a 19-year-old coming out and help them transition and grow throughout their career. So it is absolutely critical. It's just, you know, it's different how that relationship is built over the course of a player's career.
What do you think as a player? I mean, you were on both sides of it.
I think that the honesty and the trust, they both go together. And you can, you know, there are times in this business where we have trust, but we don't have honesty, right? And if you can have honesty and trust go together from a management standpoint, and sometimes you have to deliver tough messages, sometimes you have to deliver bad messages, but at least if you're honest with them and there's a trust that's built up. And then I would add the third component, you have to be compassionate. You know, if there's some compassion and some care involved, making sure that you understand that, you know, there's an extended family that comes into play, not just the player that you're dealing with and the fans, but then, you know, he could have a son or a daughter at school. You know, there's a mother, there's a cousin, there's all these things that you have to take into account. And when you're delivering the good information or the bad information, most of the time the bad information, you want to make sure that player has enough time to contact his people to get them aware of what's going on, because you can make a trade or somebody can get hurt and it comes across television and you may say something and there's a son or a daughter in school who's 12, 13 years old and there's a kid next to him breaking the information to him or her as opposed to them hearing it from mom or dad. So we try to take all of that into account.
Well, you know, the biggest thing for me is that a lot of the players that play for me to this day, I'm still in contact with. And that's what you build a relationship is with their families as they get married. A lot of us go to their weddings, then they have kids. And so you become part of their family. And like Isiah said, if you have honesty and trust, when you do make a trade, they understand it's part of the business. It's how you do it, how you deliver the message will show how your relationship goes beyond that. There's been guys that have traded and some wanted to be traded and they were happy and some didn't want to be traded. The toughest part, I remember I was trading Billy Owens from Philly and I remember calling his house and his wife answered the phone and she says, "Have we been traded?" Because generally managers usually don't call their house. So I said, "Is Billy there?" She goes, "Have we been traded?" And, you know, so that's where it's heartbreaking. You say, "Yes, we have." And she goes, "Where?" And I tell her, she says, "Okay." So then he gets on the phone, you talk to him. But that's the hardest phone call, no matter what, is when you got to call them, tell them they've been traded. Because you've built this trust and this family up. And now you're saying, hey, you're going to someplace. Sometimes it's for a better place for them. But sometimes they may not want to go to that place. But and like I said, they've got a house, the kids are playing Little League baseball or basketball, things like that. But that's the hardest, because you get off the phone call, you feel excited, we made this trade, we get this player coming in. Now the reality sets in. You got to make that phone call. You got to, you know, and so you ask your assistant, you know, you can get them on the phone, you call them, and the worst is when they don't answer. And you got to keep tracking them because you do have to set a time when you are going to release it. And out of all the years I made a trade, I think there was one player that never called me back and never got a chance to talk to.
Who was that player?
Keith Van Horn.
Okay. Well, it worked out a while.
Give him a call, Keith. Give him a call.
He's got stacks upon stacks. Tom, your comments on this?
2. First, with Bob Myers, I think a lot of what Bob was trying to do was demonstrate to KD, I got your back. And he was trying to protect everybody else in the organization and saying, because he knew the arrows were going to start slinging, the blame was going to start flowing, and he was trying to get out in front of that. And Kevin had gotten so much flack. But at the end of the day, to your point, your obligation is to the organization. And the relationship with the players, while personal and long-term, it's still transactional at its core until they're no longer a player. And we all know a player's acquired, a player's career is going to end. And what's fascinating are these discussions on what to do with a true franchise player like a Dirk Nowitzki, and how do you sunset the way Boston did it versus the way Dallas. Then you look at Pat Riley with Dwayne Wade and bringing him back. I mean, those are the real rich, difficult decisions to be made because it charts the next course of your franchise.
Well, I want Keith Van Horn to know that the Billy is here for you, okay? But Keith, give him a call. Let's make this right. All right, Zion Williamson is an NBA executive's dream, obviously. He's super talented. He's super marketable. We will analyze the impact of Zion on and off the court when Draft HQ continues.
Grizzlies.
Thanks to winning the NBA Draft Lottery and having the right to pick Zion Williamson #1 overall, the Pelicans are back in the fast lane and jumping up and down and making a lot of noise. And Billy, talk about Zion Williamson and the impact that he is going to make for the Pelicans and the NBA on and off the court.
Well, there are a lot of people's commission checks just went up in that video clip. But, no, he's going to make an impact just for the fact he's a great athlete. He's something with his size that you haven't seen before, but I don't know if he's going to be able to live up to this kind of pressure, this kind of hype. Social media, he's got 3 million followers. I think the way Alvin plays up and down benefits him, but it's going to be interesting to see because he's not a 3, he's not a 4, he's a basketball player. And I think the way the game is played now, if it had been played back when Isiah, when you had, Lambeer and those boys, and you got to go down and bang, I don't know if he could have existed. But now the way the game is where it's open and you can't really touch guys, I think he will have an impact. I just don't know if he'll be able to live up to the hype of who he is, who he's become.
Interesting.
Yeah, basketball-wise, I think that's a great point. Marketing-wise for a franchise, I mean, he's a franchise marketing dream right now. And if you grift going down there and you got Zion, you've energized the fan base, and that's one of the main things you have to do as a president of basketball operation is you got to sell a vision and then energize the fan base. And then you get lucky and you get Zion who, right off the bat, you're going to sell a lot of season tickets with him. You're going to get a lot of TV time, and you're going to get talked about every single night because he's going to do something that may make SportsCenter, NBA TV, TN. I mean, so he's going to have that wow factor. Now, what Billy is talking about in terms of what will he do on the floor, what LeBron James did and Michael Jordan did, those guys were performing on the floor. You're like, okay, they're marketing, but damn, they kind of good. I mean, they doing some stuff on the floor also. And that's when the two connect. Now, I think the marketing side we got on the floor, will he do the things on the floor to really, make it connect? Now, if he does the things on the floor and then you got the marketing, then you got something. But the marketing, I think, is a gimme. The must is you got to do it on the floor.
Yeah, no doubt. The best place to be as a competitive team, a contender, the next best place in the NBA is to have hope. The worst place is to be in the middle and have no hope. And New Orleans now clearly has hope. And we're all talking about what the level Zion ultimately ends up at. He'll get to determine that for us. The draft, the consensus #1 overall guys, you have the all-time greats, the LeBrons, the Anthony Davis that you hope make you a title contender. Then you have the consensus #1 overall guys that are franchise players, good, Blake Griffin maybe or John Wall, but maybe doesn't vault you into contention. And then there's the third group kind of the no consensus, Anthony Bennett, Andrea Bargnani. Zion is clearly the consensus #1 overall in this draft. And the question's just going to be, is he going to be leading that team to championship contention?
Yeah.
Or is he just going to be really good, like that second tier of consensus #1 guy?
The best part of this for Griff and for New Orleans was it gave them a clear direction. And now every single transaction they made should just complement Zion. It should build around the idea of what he can become. And that's what they did with the Anthony Davis trade. They could have kept him, but by moving him, they get multiple young assets, including the 4th pick, so he could have a running mate in his same year. And then these other guys that come from the Lakers who have gone through their growing pains, maybe ready to pop the way D'Angelo Russell went and popped. But that gave them total clarity that from here on out, everything complements the progression of this special talent. Now, if he doesn't develop, then you call an audible. But at the moment, you're going to find veterans that complement this concept, and you're going to find other young players that can come of age with him. And if they had been at 2, 3, or 4, it's a different analysis, right? That's right. It's just totally different when you've got this consensus number 1 and all that upside that goes with it.
Well, now, go ahead, Isiah.
The young guy, and then Billy, I want you to jump in on the back end of this because, when you put a lot of young guys together, right?
Too many.
Well, and they all thinking they're the man because everybody's coming from L.A. Thinking that they got something to prove. Then you got some young guys there who are already thinking they got something to prove. And then Zion's coming in. He's going to have something to prove. As a young group, all of them together, who's going to say, okay, you got to make some sacrifices, because everything is going Zion's way. And you got young guys who are still trying to, make their way. And you dealt with that in Philly with Iverson, Stackhouse, so forth and so on.
And one thing we did when Larry and I got there, we brought in Rick Mahorn as a veteran guy, Terry Cummings, and so they were the guys.
Some bad boys. That's what I'm talking about.
They were the guys, but they were the guys that grabbed the young guys like, hey, this is what Coach trying to talk to. And after 2 years, all right, it's time for them to go. Now it's time for these other guys. They understand the leadership. So I think what they got to do in New Orleans, they've got to add a couple veteran guys to the team that understand they may not get to play, but it's their job to help guide these guys along the way. It's like having a star quarterback that you don't want to go throw out there right away. Have a veteran knowing, hey, I'm going to be here for 1 year, and then this guy's going to take over. That's what I think they need to have, a couple veteran guys for Alvin. So when Alvin's preaching to the choir, these other guys like, this is what Coach is saying.
Yeah.
These are nice problems to have. There's no question about that. Now, Kawhi Leonard just led the Raptors to their first NBA championship. Next on Draft HQ, we will talk about how to...
We've been doing this for how many years? You can't continue doing the same thing over and over again. And when you get a chance to get a top 5 player, which it doesn't come very often, I think you have to jump on it. And I think we've given a chance to this team. We've tried to build it as much as we can. But at this point, we got to this level where this opportunity came in front of us, and we had to jump on it.
A little bit hot in that presser there, huh? Hey, not only
He's cool right now, though.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Not only did Raptors president Masai Ujiri make a bold trade to get Kawhi Leonard from the Spurs, but he also fired the coach of the year in Dwayne Casey in order to promote Nick Nurse. Isiah is one of the founders of the Raptors. What does it take to make bold moves like that? Is it intestinal fortitude or what?
It's that, and plus having your finger on the pulse of your team. And this is, to me, this is one of the most impressive things that I've seen in the league in quite a while. Most of us, we sit around the table and we always judge our team on potential. But very rarely do we know when our team has totally maxed out. Because we always want to give it that extra month, that extra year. Masai was like, hey, my team is maxed out, can't go any further. I'm going to make some changes, but not only am I going to make changes, but I'm still going to try to win. So I'm going to fire the coach of the year, right? Not only am I going to fire the coach of the year, but then I'm going to trade my best player. Now, all of us would have traded for Kawhi Leonard. I mean, let's be real about it. But at the same time, he had a way of looking at his team, and he said, I can't go any further. So I'm going to take a chance and go for it all. And it was the right call. It paid off for him. It really did, in a big way.
You got to look at the circumstances, too. A guy named LeBron left the East.
Yes.
So the opportunity, the reward for this risk was much higher, a much higher ceiling, a much bigger opportunity to go win the East. And I'm curious this year, guys, whether we're going to see the same thing in the West now that The Warriors have had their injuries, and it's wide open. It feels similarly wide open. So you get this chance to make these go-for-it moves that, in this case, obviously paid off. They're having a parade today.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about the West, I look at, again, New Orleans, where you got Davis and Zion, right? And I don't know if I would have traded right away, even though it looks great, you got the assets and everything. I still would have wanted to see them in October, November, out on the floor before I made the trade, you know?
And that's the point of why, Masai took such risk, because he had no guarantee that Kawhi was going to resign, just like it sounds like today he has no guarantee that Kawhi may resign. And that's where, to your point, as a leader, vision is critical, because Masai knew his team had maxed out. He took a shot to improve his team because LeBron leaves, like you're talking about, Tom. But he also probably, in the back of his mind, said, strategically, this is going to make sense, because if we give it a shot this year and we don't win, or Kawhi leaves after we win, either way, you know what? Maybe it's time for us to rebuild or retool this franchise. And it's always easier to do that when it's natural, because a player leaves, versus just doing it yourself. And if Kawhi's not on the Raptors next year, they're going to find a way to retool this thing, most likely with Siakam and Van Vliet. And they're going to have another great runway. It's just going to be with a different team.
Well, and I think that's where Masai did a great job. But he drafted Siakam, signed Van Vliet, developed him. So he got pieces. So when he added Kawhi, it wasn't the same team. These guys had been developing these guys. So when you put Kawhi with it, because you think about it, a couple years before that, we lost to Cleveland, it was a tired team. It was an older team. But he started getting younger and kept Kyle Lowry. So when he added Kawhi, he added some young pieces. And then what he did during the season, he knew his weak link was Valanciunas at the center.
Yeah.
So then he went and got Gasol. Now you add him into the mix. So, he added the right pieces. Like, I think he maxed out Terrence Ross when he had him and moved him at the right time. So I think a lot of it was timing on him. But I think the biggest thing you said, realized last year, the little piece he did with him, it didn't work. Now we've got to go get another piece. And if that doesn't work, go back to your point. Now we'll start over. But I got to give it one last shot, because, back to your point, LeBron leaves, all the cards in place. And if it doesn't work, we can retool. But he's got pieces, young pieces, that they can retool with also.
Yeah, and you made the good point about the West. Now that, Durant and Clay are down, Golden State is out, it's
wide open.
It's wide open, just like the East was wide open. Yep. So if you're ever looking for a window of opportunity, it's a narrow window. And Masai saw that narrow window and he jumped through it. But there's a narrow window in the West right now, and it looks like the Lakers are trying to jump through that narrow window before, they retool in Golden State.
Well, you got the Lakers. I think Dallas has room.
Dallas got a chance to be really good.
They get Porzingis back.
Sneaky, really good.
They've got some. So like you said, there are going to be some teams out west that will bring some guys in, and I think you'll see a lot of movement with this draft time, because guys are going to try to get move picks to try to get veteran players to help them.
Yeah.
I can say this, if Masai Ujiri doesn't win Executive of the Year, the late, great Red Auerbach is going to roll over in his grave, okay? Give him that award. NBA free agency is right around the corner, with several superstars like Kyrie Irving perhaps on the move. Our execs will break it down next on Draft HQ. Free Agent Fever starts June 30th at 3 p.m. Eastern on NBA TV, and we have you covered, obviously, all summer. The free agent news, any trades leading up to the Summer League, but we are psyched for Free Agent Fever because there's a lot of huge names out there, and we welcome you back to Draft HQ. Rick Kamla, Isiah Thomas, Billy King, Wes Wilcox, and Tom Penn. And the free agency moratorium has been moved from midnight to 6 p.m. Eastern on June 30th. Tom, how will this modify the task at hand for NBA shot callers?
Well, it means the East Coast guys get some sleep, right? Because you used to have to stay up till midnight to express your interest officially. We laugh because a lot of that happens early.
No,
look,
really?
guys.
You don't sound like you were a big fan of the midnight phone call.
Well, I was on the West Coast, so it was all right with me. It was 9 p.m., made sense.
East Coast was tough.
Look, guys, it's prime time. This is prime time viewing. It's right there in it. It makes must-see TV that night, and that's a lot of what this is about.
Yeah.
Is because the NBA free agent drama takes over now in the summer. NBA is well aware of that, and this kind of prime time presence in a period of time that otherwise used to be quiet and dead. It just makes a ton more sense to have that news pop that evening instead of in the overnight window where you wake up at 7 a.m. and try to figure out what's happened.
You know, it's really interesting. This is a long time coming, right? Getting to moving that date up, but it may actually make for a longer night of work because more stuff may actually get done. 3 o'clock on the West Coast, 6 o'clock here. You always see that deal that pops because they're like, wait a minute, when was that negotiated? How did that happen? Right. But, now there is time. So you may end up, this news may just take you deep into the night or all night because you may get traction on deals or a guy is like, I remember a couple years ago, there was a player signed at like 3 o'clock in the morning. He was like a mid-tier guy. And I was like, I told the agent I'm going to bed. And we weren't really in the mix, but it was one of those you thought maybe you could get in the mix. Yeah. You wake up and it's like done at 3 o'clock in the morning. You get a text. At some point, you gotta try to sleep, and this is like 5 days in. Yeah. So
yeah, I think that what you just said, I think that's the most difficult part. When you're sitting in that seat, in terms of everyone is targeting the big guy, right? But if you hit the low hanging fruit in terms of people who may not be getting that first phone call. And you really pay attention to them, and you can take some people off the board very quickly without other teams really getting a chance to go after those players, because the A level free agents, then the B level free agents. As a GM president, you have to make up your mind very quickly. If the B says yes, right? Do I wait on the A?
That's right.
That's right. Because if you don't get the B and then you don't get the A, you can be out. So, it's a first come, first serve.
Well, and I think that if you're a lot of these teams that have room, because a lot of the big teams, they're going to wait for those main guys. But you're right, as if you go after those smaller guys or some of the restricted guys like D'Angelo Russell, because Brooklyn has got their money waiting for some major guys. Yep. If you want a guys, you want D'Angelo Russell, go right away and try to put an offer to get them to accept your offer. And you put a time limit. Like, look, you got 1 hour to accept this or we're moving on. And that happens, guys start putting time limit. But I do think,
whoever you're talking to, right?
Yeah.
Here's $200 million, and you got
$200 million.
You got an hour to make it.
There you go, Rick Chamler, right there.
Exactly.
But that's right. You're saying you got an hour to make this decision, and that's a lot of money. But I think you're right though. Some teams can really build out their roster if they start going for those guys that aren't in that A level but are good players. Because what you find some teams do, they go spend that money on those top guys, and they don't have a bench.
Yeah.
And if you got a pretty good starting five, if you can add to your bench and make some depth, you're going to go further than some of those other A teams.
How much influence did you guys put on the outside of the fence? You build a fence around the player or the player that you're recruiting. How much pressure did you put on the outside when you say, hey, look, I'm getting ready to offer, John over here $200 million. I'm not telling John. I'm gonna let you know that I'm gonna offer him $200 million. Can you let John know I'm gonna offer him $200 million? And that guy's like, John, you got to sign. This is $200 million.
And you start breaking it down. Here's what the paychecks are gonna look like every other month, every other week. When you get this amount of money. So here, but also you start thinking if it's New York, here's what your taxes going to be. If you're in California, if you're playing in Texas, here's what it's going to be. So you start showing it, and guys look at that paycheck every 2 weeks. It's a big number.
It's so interesting, though, because, Zeke, you're talking about it, prioritization. You have plan A, plan B, and plan C. And plan C may be like a rebuild. Yeah. Plan B, you may have to get, because that's your highest probability of success. And you may have to pass on plan A if it's unlikely, even though it's your greatest probability of being a contender.
And now, this is where analytics come in.
The probability of all this. It always goes back to analytics.
Yeah, I got a 30% chance at Durant, but I got a 100% chance at Kemba. Who do you take?
That's right.
I may take the Kemba at 100 as opposed to waiting on the 30.
Yep.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. Billy, Tom, Wes, Isiah, really appreciate you guys. Everybody watching, we appreciate you as well. Big thanks to producer Stephen Timlin, our director Brent Berkman, and our fantastic crew here on NBA TV. We will see you very, very soon. Enjoy the draft and enjoy free agency.